It's 11 p.m. The deadline is tomorrow morning. You've known about this for 3 weeks. And yet, here you are, for the 5th time tonight, opening your phone to check something that absolutely could not be more unimportant. You're not lazy. You're not stupid. You know exactly what you need to do. So why can't you just do it? This is procrastination, and it affects almost everyone, at almost every stage of life. In fact, one large research review found that around 20% of adults consider themselves chronic procrastinators, not just occasional delayers, but people for whom putting things off is a defining, repeated pattern in their lives. Today, we're going deep into the actual psychology and neuroscience of why we procrastinate, and more importantly, what real research says actually helps. Let's get into it. Why do we procrastinate? The real science. For decades, people assumed procrastination was simply a time management problem, that procrastinators just needed a better planner, a stricter schedule, or more willpower. But research from psychologists like Dr. Tim Pychyl and Dr. Fuschia Sirois completely changed this picture. Their studies show procrastination isn't primarily about managing time at all. It's about managing emotion. Here's the core idea. When you face a task that makes you feel anxious, bored, insecure, or overwhelmed, your brain looks for a way to escape that uncomfortable feeling right now. Scrolling your phone, cleaning your room, watching one more video. These all provide instant relief from the negative emotion attached to the task. In other words, procrastination is not a failure to manage your schedule. It's your brain's attempt to regulate a bad mood in the short term, even though it creates a much bigger problem later. Researchers call this short-term mood repair at the cost of long-term goals. To understand why this happens, it helps to look at 2 competing parts of the brain. The limbic system is older, faster, and emotional. It's constantly asking, what feels good right now? It doesn't think about deadlines or consequences. It just wants immediate relief and reward. The prefrontal cortex, on the other hand, is the planning, reasoning part of your brain. It thinks about the future, about goals, about long-term consequences. It's the part of you that knows the report needs to get done. Psychologist Piers, who conducted one of the largest meta-analyses on procrastination ever done, described this as an internal tug-of-war. And here's the key insight. The limbic system responds instantly, while the prefrontal cortex takes more effort and mental energy to engage. When you're tired, stressed, or emotionally drained, the limbic system tends to win by default, which is exactly why procrastination gets worse under stress, not better. There's another concept that explains procrastination almost perfectly. It's called present bias, or in economic terms, hyperbolic discounting. Economist George Ainsley described this pattern. Humans don't value future rewards and consequences the way we value present ones. A reward or relief available right now feels enormously more valuable than the exact same reward available even a few days from now, even if, logically, we know the future one matters more. This is why future you, who has to deal with the finished report, the studied exam, or the paid bill, feels almost like a different person than present you, who just wants to feel good in this exact moment. Present you keeps making promises that future you has to keep, and present you almost always wins that negotiation because the discomfort of starting is immediate, while the pain of not finishing is, for now, comfortably far away. Another major driver of procrastination is something that seems backwards at first: perfectionism. Multiple studies, including work reviewed by Dr. Sirois, show a clear link between perfectionistic tendencies and chronic procrastination. If you're afraid that your work won't be good enough, starting the task means facing that fear immediately. Not starting lets you protect an imaginary version of the work that's still perfect, because it doesn't exist yet. There's a strange kind of comfort in this. As long as you haven't tried, you can tell yourself, I could have done it perfectly if I'd had more time. The moment you actually start, that comforting illusion disappears, and it gets replaced by the much scarier reality of an imperfect, real, unfinished draft. For many people, avoiding that discomfort is exactly what procrastination is protecting them from. Here's where procrastination becomes a trap instead of a one-time event. It creates a loop. You avoid the task. For a moment, you feel relief, but shortly after, guilt and shame creep in. Why didn't I just start? What's wrong with me? That guilt makes the task feel even more emotionally loaded than before, which makes it even harder to approach next time, which leads to more avoidance. Dr. Fuschia Sirois has researched this cycle extensively, and her findings point to something surprising. Self-criticism doesn't break this loop, it strengthens it. People who are harsher on themselves for procrastinating tend to procrastinate more in the future, not less, because the negative emotion attached to the task keeps growing. In contrast, her research found that people who practice self-compassion, treating themselves with the same understanding they'd offer a friend, actually procrastinate less over time. Being kind to yourself about a slip-up breaks the guilt loop instead of feeding it. You might think a tighter deadline would simply force people to stop procrastinating. Sometimes it does, but research shows this often just shifts the problem instead of solving it. When a deadline finally becomes urgent enough, adrenaline and stress hormones spike, giving a burst of forced focus. Some people rely entirely on this deadline adrenaline to get anything done, but studies on stress and cognitive performance show this comes at a real cost. Work produced under last-minute panic tends to involve more errors, more shallow thinking, and significantly higher stress levels than work paced out over time. So the pattern isn't really solved, it's just repeated, deadline after deadline, with the same anxiety and last-minute scramble each time. So what does research actually say helps? The first well-supported strategy is called implementation intentions, developed through research by psychologist Peter Gollwitzer. Instead of a vague goal like, "I'll work on the report tomorrow," an implementation intention is a specific if-then plan. If it's 9 a.m. and I've had my coffee, then I will open the document and write for 25 minutes. This works because it removes the moment of decision, the exact moment where the limbic system usually wins the tug of war. You're not deciding whether to start. You already decided in advance exactly when and how you would. Multiple studies across different goal types have shown implementation intentions significantly increase the rate at which people actually follow through, compared to simply intending to do something. A second strategy, studied by behavioral scientist Katherine Milkman, is called temptation bundling. The idea is simple. Pair a task you tend to avoid with something you genuinely enjoy, but only allow yourself that enjoyable thing while doing the task. Only listening to your favorite podcast while at the gym, for example, was shown in her research to noticeably increase how often people actually showed up to exercise. A third, simpler trick many psychologists recommend is the 5-minute rule. Instead of committing to finishing the whole task, you only commit to 5 minutes of it. This works because starting is usually the most emotionally difficult part, thanks to that present bias we talked about earlier. Once you're a few minutes in, the activation energy has already been spent, and continuing often feels much easier than the decision to begin did. If procrastination really is an emotion regulation problem, then the deepest, most lasting fix isn't a productivity hack at all. It's how you treat yourself when you fail to start. Dr. Sirois' research consistently found that self-compassion, forgiving yourself for procrastinating in the past, without excusing the behavior, but also without harsh self-judgment, was linked to lower procrastination and lower stress over time. This doesn't mean making excuses. It means recognizing that guilt and shame don't build discipline. They build avoidance. Understanding your own patterns with curiosity instead of criticism turns out to be one of the most science-backed ways to actually break the cycle long-term. So, why do we procrastinate? Not because we're lazy, and not because we don't understand time. We procrastinate because, in the moment, avoiding an uncomfortable feeling wins out over pursuing a distant goal. The real fix isn't shouting at yourself to just do it. It's making the start smaller, making the plan specific, and, maybe hardest of all, being a little kinder to yourself the next time you slip. Future you will thank present you for that. If this helped you understand your own procrastination a little better, subscribe to Human Science. Every week we break down one real study about how your mind actually works.